When you think about Kuro games, it's easy to think about Wuthering Waves due to how popular the game has gotten, with a population level comparable to Hoyo game titles. Many of you might not know about Kuro's other game, Punishing Gray Raven, or PGR for short. This game was released in 2019, and from my understanding, the game is relatively niche. I've wanted to play this game for a while now, especially after playing Wuthering Waves, and I'd like to give a general review on it from the perspective of a casual Wuthering Waves player. First off, for those who might not know what PGR is, it's a hack-and-slash story-based gacha game that takes place in a post-apocalyptic world full of creatures known as corrupts. The player plays as a commandant, which is basically a self-insert, of the Grey Ravens, a group set to fight against the corrupts. We follow the perspectives of Lucia, Liv, and Lee for a lot of this story, especially in the beginning, but as time goes on, we get to meet more characters and follow their perspectives. The story is told in a 2D visual novel form, and the combat itself is 3D using characters known as constructs that you've pulled. The characters all have their own personality, at least the ones I've seen so far. All of them are mostly serious, but they do interact with each other as a team. You, the commander, serve as a self-insert who has dialogue options that'll affect the responses of the other Grey Ravens or other characters in the story. If you've played Honkai Impact 3rd, the game is very similar to this one, which given the Kuro track record, even though this was before Wuthering Waves, I do find it pretty funny. Since this is from the perspective of a Wuthering Waves player, I wanted to say instead of being in an open world, you go through levels, which are very quick, and as you progress through the story, you'll unlock events, combat modes, and side stories to flesh out the characters. An interesting aspect about this story and this game is that once you beat a chapter, you can go back and play a hidden chapter from another character's perspective. These stories consume stamina, and I found it really easy to progress through the story since it's really just a brief cutscene of characters talking and then a few enemies to fight, at least in the early game. The game gives a ton of stamina, so as an early game player, it's pretty easy to progress through the story in a short amount of time. I'd like to talk about the character designs. So if I showed you this character, you'd probably think they look lame and unfinished, but then if I show you this one, you might think, okay, this game is onto something. As you can see, the game is pretty dated compared to what we may be used to now. You really can see undeniable improvement, which is pretty funny. It's worth noting that there's not like 100 different characters in this game. It's a smaller set of characters who get their own redesigns as the story progresses, and I think that's really helpful because it makes everything more coherent story-wise. I'm not fully bashing on the older designs. This was Kuro's second game and was made well before Wuthering Waves' budget. Despite the older designs, the older characters still play pretty fun, with a few exceptions. Look at this man, Roland, for example. He has a great design, and he was written to be such a scary, crazy, evil guy, but it was comical how bad he played and how slow he was. Maybe I'm skill-issued, but the story was really hyping him up to be a scary threat, but he was just so slow, and it was embarrassing. Besides him, I think the vibe is what's really going to draw people in, and the modern character designs will especially help with that. Similar to Honkai Impact 3rd, the new 5-stars would be upgraded versions to old ones, which I think is great because it won't shift the story awkwardly to focus on another set of characters. Regarding progression, I think it's pretty simplistic, but it is difficult to navigate. And while I haven't caught up to the story, I do see the appeal of things, especially after doing some of the combat events. I like the avatar drawings and I like the art scenes. I think it's really pretty. Speaking of the combat, it's somehow straightforward but also complex at the same time. It's a hack-and-slash game with an orb system based on the colors blue, red, and yellow, and players can do combos based on the colors of orbs they have. There's a dodging mechanic similar to Wuwa, and I think for a gacha game, this game is mildly difficult with the endgame modes. Fortunately, a lot of the events I did gave me trial units, so I got to enjoy them and I found it pretty fun. The story levels have been easy so far, and there's merit to that because I won't feel need to spend to play the game. For anyone who plays PGR, I'm sorry that you have to see my pitiful excuse for combat and teams. Your game is cool, I'm having fun, I do have some gripes though. I'm just gonna preface that I'm a pathetic woo-wah casual, so I'm gonna say it. The UI is hard to navigate, and I found it hard to find all the challenges. And there's a lot of them. I think this is just gonna be an issue with newer players in general, just because of how old the game is and will continue to get. It's a skill issue, I know, and I anticipate with time I'm gonna be able to navigate through everything like it's second nature. It's just really a lot at the moment. I can see the game being hard to get into, but over time things began to click more and the story did start to pick up and characters began to interact with each other more, which I appreciated. I haven't yet hit the point where it's clear that the Wuwa budget kicked in, but as far as I could tell, they really did want to make the most of what they had. I think that the gacha system in this game is kind of interesting for a few reasons. The most notable difference is that there are 2 premium banners. As you can see, there's 2 banners with the same unit. One is called the themed event construct and the other is called the fate themed construct. From my understanding, the one with the 80 to 100 pity is for those who love to gamble but can suffer more. I've been using the 60 pity banner because I know that I'm not going to be the exception, and if you play, just use the 60 pity banner. You're not going to get lucky and it's better to play it safe. Each unit, from my understanding, ends up going onto the standard banner, which makes it really easy to collect units that you need. There is another banner that gives an S rank every 10 pulls, those S ranks being part of a group called Uniframes. From my understanding, they are relatively old and probably are never going to be better pulls than newer units. I did get this guy for free from leveling though, so that's pretty cool. The game also has a lot of top-ups, and you actually have to go into the top-up shop every day to get the free stamina, which is a little weird, and you can always see there's a ton of currency to buy. I think the conversion rates are a little weird, and it's not really simple, which makes me think they want you to lose track in how much money you're spending. So it is always good to be wary of that, because these things can go down a slippery slope, so it's better to be mindful and know what you're buying. However, as a new player, I found it easy to get pulls, and I find it fun to progress through the game. Weapons are craftable from my understanding, and buying fragments or constellations for your characters are doable. It's also pretty easy to get the characters that you want from my understanding, especially since they go into the shop. Despite all of that, I do think the game is pretty new player friendly. I think there will be a lot of catch-up work and a lot of dated things. I can see the game being not for everybody, especially if you don't want to commit to so much stuff, especially since some of it is a little dated. But I do think there is something here. For me, the most fun part is the combat, and that is true for Wuwa as well. So I think players who like Wuwa's combat will also find interest in PGR. Like, I don't know the intricacies of the game, I'm extremely casual, and I may or may not have skill issue, but even with the older units, I found them fun, and I think that there is a lot to the game. There's a lot of combat events that give a lot of different trial units to mess around with, which I think is pretty good, because then you could get through the game without feeling the need to spend. I pulled one of the newest units, which happened to be Lucia, and I just assumed she was broken and called it a day. She's made the story pretty easy to clear now, especially since I got her team recommended partner, Anaxa. I'd say the only predatory practice that I found so far was the ranked system that puts you against other players, but beyond that, everything has been straightforward and I haven't felt the need to spend. The skins here are top notch, but that's a different story. There is a guide and novice event that gives you a lot of currency and even some S-rank units and weapons. Even though they are pretty old, it is something to do, especially as a beginner. There's even a team recommending page as well as a build guide for every character, which is really nice. And I think that Kuro wants to make this game more new player friendly, especially with how big Wuwa has grown. So with all of that, I think that the game is worth being given a shot if you go into it without feeling like you have to be the best or the most optimal. PvP in a gacha will just be a contest of who could spend more, but PGR does seemingly do a good job in their events by giving a lot of trial units and the endgame modes. I think this game will appeal to those who think the combat looks cool or likes the general vibes of the characters, and if that applies to you, then I would say it's worth trying. However, if the game looks dated or the purchase practices look too weird, then I totally get it too, especially since a lot of this is catch-up. I think that as time goes on, more Wuwa players are going to give PGR a shot, similar to how people play multiple Hoyo games. I think that Kuro is building a name where they can be trustworthy, and there is really no harm in giving the game a chance if it seems interesting to you. I honestly think PGR is a cool game. I like the visual novel aspect, and I really do like how the characters look, especially the newer ones. I do plan to catch up on the story and just have this game as something I can play every patch. But to those who may try this game out, just take your time, don't rush, don't burn out, don't make bad decisions. I'm glad I tried it, and I think that you might be too. I hope this review was worth your time, and I might make an updated one once I reach endgame because I do like the game a lot, but I also think that things could change once I am in the endgame. I'm pretty new to the game as a whole, and for all I know, I bricked my account beyond repair. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.